Hey everybody, welcome to video 6. We're finally going to start the uppercase, and if you've made it this far, I thank you and I encourage you to learn the entire alphabet with me for this series. As usual, we want to start with some warm-up, so here we go. Hills. Oh, not hills, those are waves. Oh my gosh, no. You guys know what I mean? I'm so excited about getting these, I can't even name my warm-ups correctly. Let's do some little waves, upside down waves. I encourage you guys to try a little bit more, but for the sake of this video, let's just go ahead and jump right into it. We're going to learn 6 letters today. The letter A, the letter O, the letter C, the letter E, the letter D, and the letter L. Okay, notice how I try to group things based on similar patterns. That's how I approach the lowercase, so I follow that same pattern here. Let's go ahead and start. Uppercase A looks just like the lowercase a, but of course bigger. So I welcome you to practice them together. What I don't want to see, guys, is I don't want anything too rounded. You want to keep them a little bit narrower rather than wider. Also, try not to put gaps between the place where you started and the place where you meet or you close the loop. And so, this is probably better, but ideally you don't even really want to see a separation. Like, that's probably the best, where it almost looks seamless. And then also, if possible, it's a little bit harder for me on this digital pen compared to a regular pen, but you want to try to aim for either the same sort of width at the top and the bottom loop, or you can make it skinnier and at the top and then wider at the bottom, maybe something like that. Okay, so try a few more. All right, the letter O, just like with the letter A, looks just like the lowercase version. So if you'd like to practice them together, by all means. Again, what I don't want to see is anything too fat. I also don't want to see loops that are entirely too big, unless you're trying to do it for more artistic flair, or unless you just really like it or something. But generally, it's better to keep it a little bit smaller rather than larger, and you want to try to keep it just to the right of the center. So I'm not doing a very good job of drawing a straight line, but the reason that I think that that's better is because you're going to connect it anyway. So let's say we're going to connect it to the letter L for olive, right? It's just easier when the loop is kind of already on the right, ready to connect to the next thing. Okay, the letter C also looks just like its smaller version. So if you want to practice them together, you certainly can. But for now, let's just try to do a couple of these C's. And what you might notice is that the bottom parts are a little bit wider, right? They're more rounded up here, and then definitely sort of more narrow at the top. Okay, that's generally what we're looking for. And also, I try to keep, and this might be really subtle for now, so it's not a big deal if it's hard to control, but I do try to keep it so that that little piece does extend beyond the curve of the letter. If you kind of keep it inside like that, I mean, it's okay, but it almost just kind of looks like a really awkward E. So it is a little bit better, I think, to keep a little bit of that space just sticking out. All right, how you guys doing? We're halfway done. Then we're going to practice some words. Capital E, or uppercase E, has an extra loop compared to the C, but of course, it kind of looks like a number 3, right? Again, try to keep your shapes the same, and mine aren't doing really great right now. This is a little too straight for me. I think I generally want to keep it more slanted like that, so let's try a few more. And again, Notice how these I try to make a lot more round than the top. Okay, how are you guys doing? Next letter is D. This time we're going to start at the top line and we're going to draw a line straight down and then a tiny little loop at the bottom instead of the top. Close back up to connect, and then a loop similar to that of the uppercase O. So down, small loop, up, medium loop. Straight line down, small loop, up, medium loop. Again, I try to keep the bottom part a little bit wider than the top. You can certainly make them more uniform if you prefer, and you can even make this loop a little bit bigger. But again, what I don't want to see is just something so big unless you are trying to do it for sort of more artistic purposes. So try a few more. Ooh, this is definitely too high. Okay, that's better. Again, try not to keep a gap like that. Try to actually close it up. Okay. Last but not least, the letter L. All right, here we go. I'm going to start halfway between the midline and the top line. I'm going to scoop up, touch the top, come back down like I'm making a letter D, and then curve up, up, little loop, like that. Notice how there's a little bit of like a boat shape here for the letter L. I think that that's something that helps to make this letter look very elegant. Unlike the printed letter L, which is just sort of straight, if you try to make that straight, it just doesn't look quite as beautiful. And, you know, I think it's sort of a more natural flow, and I think you'll agree with me as you kind of make more of these. Once you create that little loop at the bottom, you naturally just want to go down and then back up, especially as you're getting ready to connect it to the next letter. So let's try a few words with these, starting with the letter A. So maybe we want to say, or to write, excuse me, somebody's name, like Adam. If you guys remember, the lowercase d connects at the bottom, so it's very easy to just go ahead and connect those two letters, not at all difficult. Maybe try another word, maybe all. Maybe you're writing a letter and you want to say all the best, right? Okay, the letter O, maybe we want to say, oh my, oh, oh, oh my. Okay, that probably wasn't the best, but you guys get the point. Oh. Okay, notice how I did extend my loop down to the midline, and that's just so I can have a good enough space, or a, big enough space where I can create a nice loop for my H. You could, if you wanted to, bring it sort of down to the bottom. I see that every now and then. I just prefer not to, and again, that's just a personal choice. Okay, next letter, C. Maybe we want to write chill. Okay. Again, it's safely easy to connect the letter C because it ends at the bottom line. Maybe try another one, like cake. All right, how are you guys doing? Let's try the next one. Capital E or uppercase E, maybe earth. How are you guys doing? Okay, next one, uppercase D. Now D can be a little bit tricky because sometimes it's hard to connect to letters that start at the bottom. Like maybe you want to write destiny, right? You could go down, and like I said, I have seen people do that. The only reason that I don't is because if I'm writing this really quickly, it could look like an awkward O, and then it they wouldn't know what the heck I was saying. So if anything, if I have to connect it with a um, letter that starts at the bottom, sometimes I just separate them. Or I could try to make a connection sort of in the midline, but it does sort of change. For example, the letter E in this case. Okay. Instead of starting at the bottom like we normally would for a letter E, now if you connect it at the midline, it's going to look slightly different. So kind of play around with that, see what you like better. Last but not least, the letter L, and of course, when we're thinking cursive and writing letters, we think of ending with a word like love. Okay, notice how, again, I kind of did the L and the O's separately. If I were to connect them, could look like that. The only time that I don't really like to connect a capital L with anything is with letters that start either at the top or the midline. But again, that's strictly a preference issue. Let's try one more, maybe the name Laura. Okay, you could sort of make a bigger gap there if you wanted to. It's just that if you leave too far of a gap and then still try to connect the letters, um, it just doesn't look very balanced. So try different things, see what you like, and then I will see you on video 7. Good job, guys.